This is NTV.
Thank you, our viewers, for joining us. This is NTV, and we're coming to you from the Kampala International Conference Center. We are disrupting normal programming because of a special discussion we want to hold, and this is how we're going to build up the discussion.
All over the world, there is a tremendous struggle with accounting and auditing, fraudulence, and corruption. Accounting scandals are business scandals which arise from intentional manipulation of financial statements with the disclosure of financial misdeeds by trusted executives of corporations or governments. Such misdeeds typically involve complex methods for misusing or misdirecting funds, overstating revenues, understating expenses, overstating the value of corporate assets, or underreporting the existence of liabilities.
The world. And now, Toshiba is at the centre of a scandal in which executives are accused of systematically lying about the company's profits, and they lied, apparently, for the past 7 years. 3 current and previous CEOs have now quit, plus another 6 senior executives. Billions of dollars have been wiped off the share price, and the reputation of Toshiba has been blasted.
There is the misappropriation of assets, often called defalcation or employee fraud, that occurs when an employee steals company's assets, whether those assets are of monetary or physical nature. Added to this is fraudulent financial reporting, also known as earnings management fraud. In this context, management intentionally manipulates accounting policies or accounting estimates to improve financial statements. Public and management corporations commit fraudulent financial reporting to secure investor interest or obtain bank approvals for financing as justifications for bonuses or increased salaries, or to meet expectations of shareholders, or to serve wayward political interests in the case of public sector management. This type of creative accounting can amount to fraud, and investigations are typically launched by government oversight agencies, though in most cases they are outwitted by the fraudsters. In summation, this is both corporate and public corruption. Uganda is incredibly suffering from this vice of corruption. Year in and year out, corruption is identified as one of the greatest obstacles to the country's economic development, as well as to the provision of quality public services. Uganda right now is ranked as the 151st corrupt nations out of the 175 countries, according to the 2017 Corruption Perceptions Index reported by Transparency International. According to the Uganda Institute of Internal Auditors, one of the ways our country can proactively deal with this problem is by deliberately developing the internal audit profession of the country. They argue that the internal audit function is one of the most critical functions in implementing sound decentralization, good governance practices, and strong financial management systems in the public sector as well as the private corporate sector. They assert that a deficit of skills and knowledge to carry out an effective internal audit in the public sector has left a number of internal audit staff not meeting the requirements of the modern public auditing. For a more comprehensive discussion about this subject of grave interest, NTV, in partnership with the Uganda Institute of Internal Auditors, bring to full light the relevance and significance of the internal auditing profession in Uganda. Have a concurrent participation in this discussion on our Twitter and Facebook pages. You are welcome.
And we're very delighted that you're keeping us as your #1 station logged in to this very important discussion. And on Facebook and on Twitter, we have posted this question so that you can give us your feedback as we're doing the studio discussion. Do you think the internal auditing profession can be part of the solution in mitigating the graft and corruption problem in Uganda? So go there, give us your own opinion, your responses and contribution, and once in a while, I'll be making citation to it in supplementation of what is going on here in the studio. So straight away, let me get to introduce to you my gallant panel. And at the extreme end, I have the gentleman called Walter Okello, Acting Commissioner for IT Performance Audit, Ministry of Finance, Planning and Economic Development, and the President of the Institute of Internal Audit, Uganda. Mr. Okello, you're welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, viewers.
Indeed. And in the middle, have a lady, Ruth Doreen Mutebe, the internal audit specialist, commercial banking sector, board member and chairperson for the Conference Committee Institute of Internal Audit Uganda. Doreen, you're welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, viewers.
Indeed. And right next to me is Mr. Javes Ndianabo, the chairman, Board of Trustees, Institute of Internal Auditors Uganda, and the Deputy Managing Director, Chief Finance Officer, Vision Group. Javes, you're welcome.
Thank you, and good evening, viewers.
Indeed. So straight into the discussion. This is a very interesting area of discussion. Walter, just explain to us, okay, just to make sure that we settle the understanding of you, the partner, as we are having this discussion, what you are about, the Institute of Internal Auditors in Uganda, what you are mandated to do, and what you're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, moderator. The Institute of Internal Auditors started in the way back in 2002. And in 2008, it got incorporated into a company limited by guarantee. Now, the Institute offers a number of services to its members and stakeholders. Part of the offers, the first is training. We know for a fact that risk is a constant and is always changing as fast as at a very high speed. And technology is also changing. Now, the Institute positions itself to bridge the skill gap of the members, and they offer training. We have a corporate agreement with IA Global. IA Global started in way back in 1941.
IIA, that's the Institute of
Internal Auditors Global.
Yes.
It started way back in 1941 with this headquarters in Florida, USA. Now, that corporate training agreement, we have tailor-made program in the different areas where you realize there's a skill gap between the internal audit practitioners. We run this program. And through that arrangement, we have skilled our members to offer that training internally here. Related to that as well, we also offer consultancy. Now, the consultancy we offer is that we do quality assurance review program for internal audit shops in the different institutions to ensure that the internal audit shops that are operating at a standard level. And we have a pool of accredited quality assessors under the Institute. It's something that we offer. Now, the Institute also, within regionally, the Institute has actually teamed up with other institutes within the African region and form what we call the African Federation Institute of Internal Audit, the AFIA in short. Now, the AFIA is a federation of all the institutes within the African continent. We had the first AFIA conference held in Kampala in 2014. That is a product that we give our members as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Brilliantly explicated, at least for just the introductory bit.
Yeah.
And I believe people will be interested either to ascribe or to learn more about you. Now, Javes, let me get to you. Help us to, because there is internal auditing, there is external auditing, there is accounting. So give us the distinction between internal auditing and the other two functions that are literally related in the same professional field of basically accounting.
Okay, thank you. Basically, let me begin with financial accounting. Financial accounting is basically providing and analyzing data, information, financial information to the management of an institution for purposes of decision making, normally done by accountants. Now, auditing, as you said, there is internal auditing, then there is external auditing. External auditing is what is commonly talked about. At the end of the financial year, the financial accounting records are subjected to an audit by external auditors who provide an opinion on the financials, normally at the end of the year. Of course, they can start earlier, but it is an opinion on the financials for the year. Internal auditing, on the other hand, brings an insight on top of assurance, brings an insight into the information available to management. Internal auditing, because we are concentrating now on internal auditing, internal auditing will do assurance on governance, on risk management, and on internal controls. And brings
So let me understand, internal auditing or an internal auditor is an in-house agent, functional agent in terms of management and giving scrutiny to actually the systems, and the person is internal, is not
the person is normally internal, but sometimes it can also be outsourced. Normally for small organizations who may not afford a full-fledged internal audit function, they can outsource it. But in terms of the function, they do appraisals for systems and make recommendations on improvements, on governance, on risk management, and on internal controls.
In all areas, is it in non-finances or?
It's in finance. It is in financial systems, as I said, risk management and internal controls. It goes beyond. It goes beyond financials. It goes into operations. And when I talk about insight, that brings. It can be an analysis that even looks into the future. And when we're talking about assurance by internal audit, you sit and you can be comfortable that if there will be glitches, the internal auditors who are within the organization have enough time and enough capacity, the skills to look at these elements within the organization and provide. And when I talk of insight, I'm talking of deep, clear analysis.
Okay, good. I'm going to get back to about the intricacies and the controversies, especially in terms of institutional relevance of the internal auditing function, if perhaps it's considered in terms of a cost burden. Okay, and let me get to Doreen exactly about that. Let me just build a case. A publication in the Irish Banking Review by Brennan and Niam in 2003 made with the title "Accounting in Crisis: A Story of Auditing, Accounting, Corporate Governance, and Market Failures," states out the complication of the auditing profession and says that an audit is an independent review of the financial statements. The output of an audit is the auditor's report. However, the audit report is not a certificate. Auditors do not certify the financial statement. That's what this particular review was saying. That a clean audit report does not guarantee the accuracy of the financial statements, as the auditors do not examine 100% of the transactions. So he asked them, what does the term true and fair view mean? Because usually that is what the mandate to the auditor is, that you need to give a fair
for
and
the external
exactly. No, so the question here is, with this conception practical dilemma, okay, that actually you do not have a totality of understanding, or rather of engagement with the situation in the organization, does a government institution or private company really need an internal auditor in order to succeed?
Thank you so much for that question. And probably to give clarity, the auditor looks at information that is material enough to make a good conclusion. So when an auditor comes out to say it's fair, it's true and fair, then to a certain extent, to a bigger extent, it's actually true and fair. To answer your question as to whether internal auditing is relevant
yes,
to the private and public,
especially if you're looking at the cost-benefit aspect of business management, you're giving me a burden of having somebody to over-scrutinize my system, and yet they're not actually revenue generating. They simply nose diving into the...
I'm glad you quoted the case of a bank that collapsed because of one reason or the other. And one of the major reasons that institutions fail is because of bad governance. Now, the internal auditor is structured in a way that they report to the highest authority. They report to the board, or they report to the highest governing body. So in case of any compliances, in case of any information that is being hidden away, wrong things that are not brought up to the public for discussion, the internal auditor has access to the board or to the high level of, to the highest organ in the organization, and they can give this information. So it breaks the challenges we had in the past, where the executive management can actually hide that information away. And then two, the internal auditor, if they're in-house, they're usually in the organization, and they have a fair view of what is happening on a day-to-day basis. So they will be in position to give appropriate advice, appropriate check and challenge to executive management. And then three, if you have an internal auditor who is also a member of the Institute of Internal Auditors, they are part of a wide network, a global network and they pick experience from the different members that they interact with, different organizations, and all that inherently is a benefit that an organization that has an internal auditor, I should say a member of IIA, that they will enjoy that. They will not get from any other auditor.
So you support the premise that actually having an internal auditor is not such a burdensome cost, but a very valuable, relevant function.
It is. It is, because if one of the other things that internal auditors look at is compliance laws and regulations. And it is non-compliance comes with a very big cost to an organization. So if you have an internal auditor looking at the compliance to laws and regulations, policies and procedures within the organization, then that's the cost benefit you're getting, because you're not going to incur the cost of non-compliance.
Okay,
so there's value addition.
Very good. Let me go for a break and then we'll continue into the detail of that as I come back to Walter and Japheth. Thank you, our viewers, for keeping with us. Let's have a break and then we'll come back to re-engage in this discussion.
So the question is, now there are people who are very famous for bad things, The ones who are in court now from the pension fund, you remember that group? Oh, they are famous now. They have joined history. You know those people? The ones in the court, every day, they are like film stars every time. But on the wrong side of history. So, my young people here, where do you want to go? Do you want to the Judas way? Judas Iscariot, you remember the other one? Or the ones who did good things. That's why I'm very happy you have linked up with the global organization to help you with the skills, the techniques, the knowledge, the skills, but building on the basis of, on the base of honesty. And I was happy to be called here today to look at you. And we are going to have photographs taken of you and kept. And I will have one in my album. So when I hear a story, I say, oh, Bakute in Tanwood Chabadi. Then I go in the album. Over I know you.
So that was our president who was attending the 12th Annual National Internal Auditors Conference. That is an annual event here in Uganda, and he was making his remarks, commending the internal auditors in Uganda to be more astute and committed to their job and not to be compromised. And right here, we're continuing into the discussion in the studio. And so, Walter, you have an affiliation globally, the Global Institute of Internal Auditors, which has about 170,000 members. So we need to understand how it's locally structured, the membership containment, and how you spread around the country, and how subscription comes to your institute.
Thank you, moderator. The Institute of Internal Auditors is governed by Board of Directors that is elected every 2 years. Now, the elected board is led by the president, and the president has 3 vice presidents, and the 2 past presidents are part of the board to help in the
current president.
I'm the current president. Okay. To help with the succession arrangement. And even we have 8 other board members. The 8 board members are drawn from both private and public sector. So there's a smooth succession arrangement in the management of the institute. The institute is run by an executive secretary who is a permanent staff of the institute locally. Now we are affiliated to the Global Institute. The Global Institute now has over 190,000 members in about over 190 countries, spread worldwide. So that's the arrangement in terms of the affiliation with the Global Institute. And we draw a lot of benefit by actually affiliating with the Global Institute.
And I've seen you have professional assurance engagements or associations with a certified internal auditor, CIA, certified government professional auditor. How it does, and each of them has a certain membership contribution. What is that about that you have to have?
First of all, practicing internal auditors, I encourage to enroll and become members of the institute. And there are benefits associated with being a member of the institute, ranging from a number of things like training program, access to skills. We have a resource center that was actually with funding from the Ministry of Finance. We got it, and we help people who are interested in actually studying and getting the certification exam, the different certification you mentioned. The CIA, the certified internal auditor, the certified government audit professional, the certified financial system auditors, all that. And those are specialized certificate that you get when you pass the exam. But there are a lot of benefit of being members beyond the certification that you get. First of all, you are regulated by the institute, and even the institution that is employing the auditor who is actually regulated, that auditor is certainly a different auditor from another. Yeah. Okay,
thank you for that. And just in continuation of that, Jarvis, looking at the auditor, and this area of function is an extremely antagonistic one, perceivably in the eyes of other corporate functions. If you have other people within an organization, okay, you have operations, you have procurement, you have, and it's usually antagonistic within, of course, the private corporate company or public institution due to your questioning intrusive and ethical-centric demands on those other functions and people in power. So how does an internal auditor in that regard maneuver against, you know, the often unfriendly environment of other individuals within that corporate environment or within the public sphere that he's supposed to question actually thrive and make sure that they do their job? Or they're usually, because most of the experiences that are being seen is that they're swept up and domineered by that resistance.
Yes, and of course it's explainable because of the analysis you are making, the recommendations you are making. In the olden days, it was worse. Auditors came by surprise. You just appear on a Monday morning, if it is an up-country branch, by 8 you are in the office, and everyone is, the auditor has come. And normally it would be an old man and not smiling at all, and they don't know what to expect, and you are rounding up all the ledgers, etc. But the modern internal auditor has moved on. Internal auditing is now more systematic. And because of that, for example, we've cut on surprises. You let people know in advance. Of course, there will be cases when there are suspected frauds, etc. But the general work of an internal auditor, you are reviewing systems. You don't need the surprises. A modern internal auditor knows how to capture the positive elements, how to engage everyone, the language you use, but also the way that it is systematic. When you find that this has not been done according to this, you bring it in a way that is systematic, and everyone in the organization knows that the reason why we have internal audit is to improve systems. And everyone in the organization should want to have improved systems, efficiency in all the areas, governance, etc. So because of that, the modern internal auditor has cut his way of doing things. And in fact, many organizations, many people in the organization should be actually going to the internal auditor sometimes to ask for assistance. The internal auditor is an expert in internal control. So when you have an issue, you go to internal audit. There will still be some elements because you will make reports, and sometimes there will be action by executive management that some people will be disciplined because of your reports. There will be those elements. But the way to do it is to have a holistic understanding of the whole organization. The reason we have internal audit is not to catch thieves. They are not policemen. They are in the organization as advisors to the organization with the main view of improving systems.
And making sure that fraud is actually dealt with. Because
fraud is one of those elements that many times brings that controversy. But internal auditors do much more than... And fraud, I think you're talking about fraud detection.
Yes.
So the main area should be fraud prevention. So if you are looking at systems and making sure that the systems are robust, making sure that the governance processes, you are making recommendations on governance processes. In other words, you are trying to proof the organization against fraud before it even occurs. That is different from where you are looking around and trying to catch thieves and recommending sacking and going to prison.
Okay, so let me follow it up with actually Doreen. So Doreen, before the central bank pulled the curtains on the Uganda Crane Bank, which we all know, okay, it had been receiving a clean bill of health, of course, from accountancy and audit firms, as is required by Bank of Uganda regulations before it approves financial statements of a commercial bank. An external auditor must have expressed an opinion on to show, you know, for whatsoever was audited as representing whether it's a true and fair picture of that. And all this entire process, of course, before it goes to an external auditor, would expect that an internal auditor has actually been present, has been involved, has been scrutinizing, and doing that kind of, you know, engaging work of ensuring the systems are functioning and there is no fraud. So the view about internal auditors really is quite a jaded one. So with Uganda facing incredulous levels of corruption with innumerable occurrences of public and private office abuse, which I cannot enumerate, you know, and mismanagement in the presence and in at times complicity of actually internal auditors, how do you persuade the nation that the solution to better governance and corruption mitigation is actually having internal auditing? Because there's a perception that accounting and auditing technocrats are part of Uganda's corruption and graft problem.
Indeed controversial, like you see. And again, good you have raised the case of Crane Bank and the levels of corruption that we have in the country. It is important to note that these internal auditors are hired from community, and they are part of the society of Uganda. So if you have many corrupt people out there, it is likely that a few of them will trickle into the internal audit profession. However, I would like to encourage everyone in the private sector and in the public sector to have faith in the internal audit function, especially the internal auditors that are members of IIA. Because we have a framework
where the Crane Bank internal auditor is part of the IIA. I need you to make it clear.
Actually, when the Crane Bank saga happened, we checked our database to find out who the internal auditor of Crane Bank is. And at that time, we did not have an internal auditor who was a member of the Institute of Internal Auditors.
In Crane Bank?
In Crane Bank.
Okay.
Because if that happens, then we are obligated to invite that internal auditor for discussion, and we have disciplinary mechanisms for those who do not comply with our code of ethics and the international professional
I take you at your word. That is information I cannot verify. So I hope somebody out there who's watching can authenticate. Okay?
Yeah. And then we also have a framework where we can partner with other agencies. We can partner with the police. They rely on our reports. We can partner with the judiciary, because internal auditors give expert witness in court in cases of corruption or fraud in organizations. And the way that we structure our teams allows us to bring in other professionals. If we do not have the expertise in the internal audit team, then we can hire an investigator to be part of the internal audit team. We can hire a retired police officer. We can hire an engineer based on what we're trying to look out for. So the framework that we have in place supports reduction of corruption in the country. So I would encourage everyone out there to have faith in the internal audit profession.
All right.
May I supplement?
Okay, just in a minute. Yeah.
What actually is very important, all the things we are talking about in any institution, company, hospital, church, government department, the most important thing before you talk about this is the tone set at the top. And that tone is the one that will determine whether you have a good internal auditor or not. And that tone is by word and deed. The institution, when you come to an institution, from the top, you said that corruption is unacceptable here. And it is the message is consistent, and any time that anybody is caught on the wrong side is dealt with decisively.
Yeah, so we're talking again about the environment, because you see, because there's an antagonism, and you're saying now the success of an internal auditor is usually dependent on actually the influence of the people at the top. So if the people at the top have a certain inclination not to disclose, not to be straight, and not to do things right, that means actually the internal auditor will be impeded.
Definitely, in any institution.
All right, so let's talk about now the conference that is coming. At least we've made a bit of clarity on the sanity of the profession. So you have the 13th Annual National Internal Audit Conference scheduled for the 18th to 20th this month of April. Yes. Walter, talk us through about this.
Yeah, thank you. Our program is starting with the Board Audit Committee on the 17th. The Board Audit Committee, we are doing it under the theme of governance, current issues and insight. Now, what is embedded in the theme is that in the business cycle, interruption is something that is a way of life. A lot of things are coming up. And that is a forum where we are going to get chief executive officers of different institutions, audit committee members, board of directors, and practicing internal auditors coming together to interact frankly and discuss the issues that affect governance in our different institutions. We have invited keynote speakers, and the keynote speaker is going to come from IA Global. The vice president is coming to present, and this is somebody who is a chief audit executive in the First Rand Bank in South Africa, and she is also a member of the oversight committee in a number of institutions. So we expect a lot of experiences that should come in and in the discussion. We have a past chairman of IA Global coming from UK. We also have one of the affair chairman from Botswana coming up as a guest speaker. And we have a lot of actually speakers coming, even regionally. We have members from the CISA Institute in Rwanda, Kenya, Tanzania coming up. And we expect a frank interaction in Serena on the 17th of April. Now that will be followed
Serena
up.
Here?
Yes, Serena here.
Okay.
That will be followed up with a 3-day annual conference. That will be in Munyonyo. Now the annual conference are going to handle under the theme of the internal auditors rise up, reinvent, and prepare your value. Now in that, we are recognizing the fact that in our business environment, the disruption from the different technology platform that people are going to discuss and share experiences in the different areas. The risk issues that affect our work as internal auditors. They dictate that you need to reskill all the time because risk is something that is always around us and it's something that you cannot avoid. But you only need to skill yourself to manage and be able to be a better internal auditor. What tools do we have available for you to be able to do your work more efficiently? because we are generating data all the time.
Yeah.
So how do you get to the root of it, and then you give a report that the report would actually bring out all the issues that are affecting governance, risk, and internal control in the different institutions.
All right.
So we expect a lot actually at the conference.
Yeah, and I will need a snippet from Jarvis when we come back from a break, just to give us some of the, so that in case any internal auditor there or auditor wants to learn better some of the techniques that are available, we will be able to have them applied. So is it open to everyone? Is there a subscription to that effect? Or is free entry?
Is open. The board and audit committee workshop is open.
Wow. Okay. No fee.
There's fee. There's a fee to be paid. There's a fee to be paid.
You are going to have a flood.
It's open, but we are not restricted to members.
Okay.
But they pay a fee and you attend.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, our viewers, for keeping with us. We're discussing the internal auditing profession here in Uganda, and we're going to have a short break and be back to just wind up on this particular matter. Thank you. Okay, and just to give a snippet of what goes on in that conference has been mentioned, that is coming on the 18th. Let's just have a view of this video clip.
Ladies and gentlemen, why is it that when I ask, I want to point at a fraudster, he just can't do anything?
Because I don't know.
He doesn't know. Because he needs data. Right? So this is why in our presentation about data analytics, we say assume lots of fraud is taking place. But as you assume lots of fraud, it's like in this room, you see in your day-to-day when you go to work, you go to your desk, you meet so many people, you look at so many people, and you can't tell who is a fraudster. Unlike theft, theft involves stealing a physical asset, right? You get this mineral bottle water or this pen, you put it in the pocket, you get out of the door, and that is it, you have disappeared with it. In fact, one of the biggest fraud at one of the telecom company was this kind of fraud. Somebody came in with a used laptop, a very brand new laptop, but he knows the target's machine, and replaced it with the brand new and took the old one, right? And the security guard would just see, okay, this guy came in with a laptop and I've gone in. This is why if you see these days, they request you to write the serial number of your machine, to ensure that the machine you came in with is the same machine you go out with. Unfortunately, as internal auditors, we have put these controls, but the police people who implement them, they don't know why you should write the serial. So I think that is very, very important, because if you don't make sure people understand why they do some controls, then there's...
Thank you indeed. That's one of the contributing facilitators in that previous conference. And I have quite a response on Facebook and on Twitter, and let me just cite out like 4 responses from Facebook. Robert Kakoza, in the question I posed, that do you think the internal auditing function can be of any contributive value to alleviating or mitigating corruption and fraud in Uganda? And Robert says, it can, but stakeholders need to first understand what the role of internal auditing is, especially owners and board, so that auditors can practice with support and assurance from those responsible for governance, and which we've been talking about here quite frankly by Jarvis. And Frank Kabuye says that in order for internal audit to help in fighting financial crimes, its organizational status must be appropriate and the individual internal auditors must be competent. Then Salongo Hassan says it depends on the practitioner if he or she accepts to follow the ethical code of conduct, most importantly of independence and integrity, they then can mitigate that problem. And the last 2, Felix Falder, he said the internal audit functions have been compromised, leaving them as part of the problems than solutions. Talked about it still. And Frank Kabuye, no, let me not repeat that. Mark Watsala says the 50-50, but ethics and integrity and following the code of conduct can help to end it. But it's so hard. All right, so we get to Jarvis. And just as we've been hearing one of your colleagues, Mustafa, talking about these better techniques and making sure that you're such a good forensic expert. In 2014, Anita R. Morgan of Ohio Northern University, USA, and Corey Burnside of Indiana University, they submitted a research study in the Journal of Business Case Studies titled Olympus Corporation Financial Statement Fraud Case Study, the role that national culture plays on detecting and defining fraud. So she says that a corporate culture that emphasizes profits and stock prices creates an environment in which managers feel pressured to produce favorable financial statements. And if you look at the introduction I made and all the litany of the scandals that corporately all over the world, especially in the West, have been happening, it's because of that excessive environment of corporate greed. And in politics, it's the same thing. The pressure from above to make sure that you swindle, you embezzle resources, that just catalyzes fraud and degenerates people. So in that, what are the most modern and contemporary techniques and tools that should be applied by auditors to ensure that, you know, we can be able to fight this very embedded and entrenched vice in our society?
First of all, you talk about culture. Corporate governance or governance is about getting to that culture. All the structures, the laws, the rules and regulations, the people you employ should be aimed at creating a culture that has a type of ethical climate and the values that you want. That's the first thing that you deal with.
So one of the things, of course, like in public sphere, is setting up laws.
Both public and even in the private sector. You must get to that culture. You have these are the values, and you get to culture so that people are not doing right because of fear of punishment. People are doing right because this is the way we do things here. And when you do anything contrary to that, you look out of place in that institution. And everyone who crosses the line is dealt with. Now, in terms of techniques, I mean, the main thing, as I'm talking about, is to prevent fraud and corruption. But in terms of techniques, auditors should use their auditing techniques, software, that allow you, instead of sampling and picking some, software allows you to check everything in a matter of seconds so that you interrogate all the data and you know how to do it in such a way that you know what you are looking for. You are looking for things that are unusual and familiar, things that you don't expect. The other technique that auditors should use in many places is what is called analytical reviews. Analytical reviews, some things is that you will find just the corruption in a country like Uganda is actually not very complicated to detect. It's just straightforward fraud. So, but sometimes you find because of collusion, because of the ethical environment, you have the invoices, you have people confirming that we received the goods, and
even
people
if the goods weren't
received and issued. But when you use analytical review, it will bring out elements that will help you to detect. I remember, I think it was the IGG's office one time, when they detected and found that in one hospital, the amount of rice served to a patient was about 1.5 kilograms for one patient.
Per day, per what?
Per meal. Now, the moment you get to that, it means that they have colluded, because it doesn't make sense that a patient will eat 1.5 kilos of rice. I mean, on average, if you have 100 patients, that you feed them with 150 kilos. The paperwork is neat, but when you use analytical review, it shows you, because you use a number of numbers and you see how they relate to each other. So those are very key and important tools that you use. But overall, you must make it risky for anybody attempting to commit fraud. And how do you make it risky? Make it very easy to detect, and auditors will be at hand, especially if the governance framework is right. Make it, when anybody is caught, make them suffer sufficiently.
True.
That it will be a deterrent, not only to those who have committed this fraud at this time, that they would swear never to do it again, but even for those who are contemplating it. So those are really, basically, it is as basic as that.
Okay, brilliant indeed. And just thank you for that submission. So Doreen, what support does, because it seems you're really in murky waters in this environment, in as much as your intentions are really brilliant and noble. So what support do the internal auditors community in Uganda need from both the government and the general public to effectively thrive and to have this function properly working in the environment?
Thank you. The support that we need from community is, one, internal audit is a partner of the different institutions and organizations. The internal auditor is not your enemy. The internal auditor is on your side, actually. We are chasing the same goal. Secondly, I would request that organizations or institutions support their internal audit functions to go through what we call quality assurance review. It answers the question of who audits the auditor. And all the questions that we have around the practices of internal auditors, those who we are saying working together with those who are practicing corruption, all those things will come out and we'll have a very efficient and skilled internal audit function. Three, it's important to bring up the internal auditors for capacity building. During the trainings, the workshops, the conferences that we organize, so that we build capacity together in this country. And as a team of internal auditors and everyone else will be able to reduce the corruption that we are talking about, the fraud, but also improve our systems of risk management, corporate governance, and internal control.
Oh, yeah.
My other plea to the community is speak up. If there is an internal auditor who is not behaving as expected as per the code of ethics, they are not demonstrating integrity, honesty, professionalism, confidentiality, bring them up to the attention of the Institute of Internal Auditors. We have a disciplinary mechanism to deal with that, and also make our members
even
better.
if the auditor is not your member?
No.
No. If they are our members.
Okay,
Yes.
it's only
yeah.
All right.
And that brings me to the last one, to encourage every internal auditor out there to become a member. And for those who are sourcing for internal auditors, if you're really interested in having a good internal audit function, please look out for a member of the Institute of Internal Auditors. You'll get the value.
All right. Good. Well said. And let's end up with Walter. So, Walter, what is the future of internal auditing? I'm a bit, you can see how skeptical I've been. And are we going to have your purported or propounded value proposition to society that actually you can be able to contribute to the mitigation of corruption, of graft, and make sure that we sanitize our corporate and public management sphere?
Thank you. I think the future of the Institute is very bright. Because if I look back, what started in 2002 with 33 members, we have now grown to over 650 members, as well, active members, as of 31st of March 2018. I look that for better understanding of internal auditing amongst the stakeholders and the general public, of what value the internal audit brings, and of what value you get by you employing a member of the institute. And then also institution, I look for better cooperation with institution, looking for the institute when they are filling position for internal auditors in their institutions. I really see that in the cooperation growing up. Already we have a footprint in the region, where something that we have already done. As an institute, we have mentored other sister institute within the region. We mentored Tanzania, we mentored Rwanda, we supported Kenya over the years, and all picked up as an institute. And then we want to reduce the expectation gap of what people think internal auditors do, and also what the external auditors actually really do.
Okay, thank you.
Because that difference,
Thank you indeed. On that not because of the, we did disruption of normal programming. So thank you indeed for a very brilliant contribution. I think most of us are enhanced on understanding what internal auditing is. And Javez Nyanabo, the Chairman, Board of Trustees in Institute of Internal Auditors, and Walter Okello, Acting Commissioner for IT Performance and President of the Institute. and Ruth, the internal audit specialist and chairperson of the Conference Committee Institute of Internal Auditors. Very, very delighted indeed to have hosted you for this brilliant discussion.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you.
See you soon, hopefully in the near future. And thanks our viewers for keeping with us, and indeed, we are very grateful for supporting us. And if you want any discussion, either as a ministry or department or agency, or a corporate organization, please come talk to our IMD or our sales team or myself, and we'll make a very comprehensive arrangement for this discussion. Otherwise, we resume normal programming. Main is next. I'm Karaga Baldwins.